Welcome to a cozy little plan with me video. While in most of my work I'm thinking and talking about mental health over on the Depth Work podcast, I occasionally do love getting really nerdy about reflection processes, planning, goal setting, other things that I think really quite contribute to my own mental health. So today I'll be taking you through my monthly and weekly planning and reflection process. I make all my own planner pages and templates. I've developed these over the last 12 years, and I'll also show you what I do digitally as well if that's more of your jam. I have all the templates for the planning pages and Notion dashboard linked below, so you can always take a look at that if you like them. But more than that, I just hope to give you some ideas for things that you can do each month or week for a little bit of a refresh, especially if you're watching this around the new year or a new season or a birthday or any marker in time where you're ready for something new. This is a really perfect way to begin and start to get really organized. I always set my space first, a candle, tea, make it a ritual. I find that being quote unquote disciplined is really less about doing what you don't want to do anyways, and more about making things that are really healthy and good for you, fun, and easy. So I'm starting off here reflecting on my past month. I write down all of my big and little wins in every area of life. I like to give myself the grace to count even the tiniest, smallest things. Then I write down some of the lessons that I learned. Even the simple lessons, things that challenged me, something I took away from this month, something that really worked. And then I pick a word of the month to trigger memories or to help me recap much later in the year. I choose a most improved life area. This comes in handy again for larger annual reflection processes. And then I ask myself, what's not working? What can I do differently? And then I write a bit about what feels really nourishing to me these days. I'll be honest, it's usually the same things, but writing down those same things month after month really gets it into my mind that these are the things that are most helpful in my life and reminds me to make time for them. I find that all of this is really helpful when a new year comes around and you think, what the hell did I do or accomplish or learn? I keep all of these monthly pages or I transfer them to Notion, my online system, so that I have a nice starting point for an annual review, which is actually what I'm doing right now as I make this video. And then next I look at the coming months holistically. So first I take a look at any major events. For me, these are always things like big trips, maybe moon phases, deadlines, birthdays. Whatever you may want to see an overview of is really helpful. And next we have some goals. So I will say I've gotten a lot more lax about goals over the years. I used to have a really detailed outline process, which I still love and I think is useful. But as I get older, I also like to leave a lot more room for mystery and uncertainty and surprises. Sometimes life happens in ways that are actually even better than you thought it might be. So basically, I'm less neurotic and less pushy about these, but I still like to have a reference point. I still like to say, okay, what is really the one most important thing that I can achieve or do in my work and my personal life this month? What is it that will really make me feel like I'm growing or learning? And then I like to break that down into smaller, what they call sprints. Or these can also be places where you write notes on how to experiment with this. Maybe you don't really know where to start, but you can jot down some ideas. This last part of the page at the bottom is my digital checklist. I'll get into that later and which parts of this I wind up keeping track of in my online system. But for the most part, for me, there's nothing that replaces a paper planner. There's having my weekly to-do list that I can physically check off and doing this reflection process by hand. It just feels so much more organic. But there are things that I definitely do want to keep track of digitally that are super important in that domain. So I'll get into that later. Then I write down as part of my monthly reflection process, what do I want to shift? What's going really well? What do I want to keep making space for? And what do I need to nourish my mind, body, and spirit? Or if that doesn't resonate, how do I want to have more fun? You can make these whatever you want, but these 3 questions for me are always really generative. I remember what it is that I want to build upon and what's really important to me. Now, we are seasonal beings. No matter where we live, we all have cycles. And I love being really connected to natural seasons and cycles. There's a time in the year and the month for each thing. So what is it now? What is it the time for now? I like to brainstorm some activities. Then I ask, who do I want to deepen connections with this month? My relationships are really important to me. Relationships are actually one of the most important indicators of someone's lifetime happiness. So I always like to remember who I'm intentionally keeping in touch with. Next, I make a list of my 10-year goals. These don't change every month, obviously, but I like to rewrite them down every month and not just have my list shoved away somewhere, because it reminds me in the long-term, big picture vision why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. When we get lost in the weeds, lost in the sauce, it's really easy to forget what it is that we really desire in the future. And if you have no idea what your 10-year goals are, that's totally okay. I do not think that that's a necessity. It's certainly not a necessity to have 10 of them, right? But I do think we all have a deep felt sense of something that we would like to feel in the future or move towards for our future. And so that's why annually I always reflect on my 10 and 3 and 1 year goals. Again, making space for mystery and uncertainty and all the things in life. These are quite flexible. I do not do these to put pressure on myself. But over the years, I have developed a pretty specific process that makes goal setting fun, deeply connected to my values and integrity. And that feels really motivating. And so if that's something that you're interested in, I have a mini course called Goal Setting for Creatives on Skillshare. This video is not at all sponsored by Skillshare, but Skillshare is pretty great, and I love having a course up on there for anyone who does their free trial or wants to have access to all the courses on Skillshare. If you are already a Skillshare member, you already have access to my course, and I'll link that down below. At some point, I kind of realized that I know there are enough goal-setting courses out there, but I couldn't find anything that was really geared towards people who are multi-passionate. I wanted something that really allowed a lot more room for creativity and grace and ease and really honored all of my different passions. So if that's your jam, you can check that out. Now on to the weekly plan. The monthly and weekly steps feed directly into each other. And I find that spending 30 minutes at the top of my week saves me literally hours. It starts with a brain dump. So what's in your head? What's important that's due this week? What's coming up? So I look at my calendar, I see some of the things, or I look back at prior weeks, and I just take down some mental notes. This doesn't have to be like writing down specific things, but more like, this week I'm prepping for the holidays, or this week this is my most important priority. And then at the bottom, I start to really write out some of those more specific to-dos, and I break them down into 3 categories. Things I want to do, things I'm currently working on, and things that I quote unquote should do, but don't necessarily want to. And then I ask 3 questions about them. Does this need to be done? By me? This week? And over time, you'll probably notice as I do what starts to get pushed off and off and off. And that's a really good indicator for myself that I need some help in that domain. Then I start to plan out my week on a project basis with my to-dos. This, for me, was the biggest game changer. I don't know where this system came from, but I learned it from Hillary Rushford. Basically, you list out your open projects. You can even look at your to-dos and think, okay, what are the biggest categories that these fall into? It might be something like client work, business backend, admin, school, home renovation. It can be so many different things based on your life. You can group them however you like. But I like this because if you have too many open projects, you'll know. Like, I get overwhelmed if I have more than 4 or 5 at a time with specific to-dos. Now, this is where ticky-tacky comes in, because you might be like, okay, well, I have so many, kind of little odds and ends that I need to do. And that's where I group all of the ones that I call ticky-tacky, which is just all of the silly little things that I need to do in the week. I add things like get groceries or do my taxes or all of those kind of odds and ends. Now, going back to the idea of cycles, if you're someone who menstruates, even if you're not, we all have different energy levels throughout the month, and I think that we are so very cyclical. I learned these 4 phases from Kate Northrup, and these 4 phases are the fertile void, which is more rest, relaxation, emergence, where you're actively brainstorming, starting new projects, visibility, where you are really out there networking, outward-facing tasks, and completion is the one where we're focused on finishing things, completing things, tying up any loose ends. Then, according to those 4 phases, I look at which activities are kind of aligned this week. These are just little reminders I jot down for myself of the types of activities that may be better this week, and really syncing my to-dos and my week in general based on my menstrual cycle. Absolute game changer. I mean, really, like if I can even just take off 15% less to-dos on the weeks that I am menstruating, it is a huge win, absolute huge win. But another strange thing that I've noticed is specifically with the luteal phase of your menstrual cycle, I get so much more ticky-tacky things done. I have so much more brain space for all of the things that during the other cycles or other times in the month, I seem to really not have the brain space for. So it's super convenient to really plan some of those things out. And then another Kate Northrupism is the universe's to-do list. This is just essentially something that is on my mind, is something that I'm either actively working towards, desiring, but I don't have a ton of control over maybe, or it's not the right time to decide or do that thing. I put it on this list so that it's there, it's in my awareness, but I don't feel like I have to truly like work on these things or take total control of them, because often they're things that I can't and have to have a little bit of trust and let go. And then I write down the support that I currently have, the support that I currently need, and then some of my intentions on ways that I can really care for myself this week. Then I look at the calendar as I start to do my more daily breakdowns, and I start to mark down any appointments, events, and I list at the top of the week some of the preferred top tasks for those days. You don't have to fill this in all the way. I definitely don't. But I kind of know which tasks I need to do at certain times, especially based on deadlines. And then I really like having this whole bottom part underneath each day as essentially part bullet journal style brain hub. Like, I think through things, I make shopping lists, timelines, ideas, quotes, things that I hear throughout the day, notes from a podcast, things I may want to try out. And you can, of course, record these digitally. If some of these wind up being really important or I don't act on them right away, then I will add them to my Notion, my online planner later. And then, of course, there's an end of the week reflection as well, which is where I ask myself some pretty important questions, like, what am I really proud of that week? What still needs wrapping up? What's unfinished? What am I looking forward to? And these questions really help me feed into the next week and the next month. Feels like a very seamless, tidy process. And like I said, honestly, it really only takes about 30 minutes, maybe an hour if I am spending some really solid time with this or it's a particularly busy week. But once you get used to the process, it's really just plug and play and saves me infinite time because all I have to do is refer to this weekly plan and I know exactly what I need to be doing each day. And I stay connected to my broader monthly and yearly intentions. So if you're someone who really likes digital planning, maybe you're not as much of a paper person or you know that you additionally need that digital element to kind of keep things synced up, I absolutely love Notion for this. So once I'm done in my monthly and weekly planning, I then go to my Notion Life dashboard. I have a copy of this dashboard, a template, if you're interested in it, and I love this thing. It's actually, people use that term second brain. It truly feels like that to me. It has every area of my life here. But what's most relevant for today is actually going to be this monthly review. So I look at my planner and everything that I have written down in my planner as the day-to-day, the things that I don't necessarily need in the long term. And I look at my digital planning as everything that I want to keep track of that then gets saved and stored so I can use it later. And the value of these monthly reflections and adding them both in my written planner and in Notion is that at the end of the year, when you're doing your annual planning, and whether you take a workshop on this or you just kind of sit down with a pen and paper yourself and you're trying to remember what the heck did I do this year, you have it all right here, organized for you, just little snippets. So let's take a look at October so far, the month that just passed. Here I can see, actually I track my habits in Notion as well, and so I can see how I did on all of my habits. Did not get as much sleep as I wanted to, but did pretty well in learning German, for example. And if I scroll down, then I have all of these same questions that I ask in my monthly planning, and all I have to do is just transfer it right over, only the really important ones. So the word of the month, biggest wins, what did I learn? And then when it comes time for your annual planning, you have it all right there. It truly is just the most wonderful, absolute perfect things. Other things that I do in my Notion dashboard is I will also look at my current projects. So when I look at my projects here, I can add or update anything else that I might want to add. So for example, I have a podcast. It's called Depth Work, features holistic mental health practitioners and researchers and scientists, and it's really fun to do. And I have a space in here for ideas, for content, for my whole process. And so if I have ideas for different content or milestones that I want to add, if there's something that I added in my monthly or weekly, then I can just add it right in here too. I can add anything that I'm not going to do right now to my lookout folder, which is things that maybe I want to do down the road. I can add things to my quarterly updates where I can look at my projects and I can evaluate new projects as well as milestones. And it's really just such a fantastic way of organizing everything. I hope that you enjoyed this cozy little plan with me. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or any feedback on things that have really worked for you. I love talking to people about nerdy planning things, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.